Mr. James had always loved his neighborhood. It was a quiet place where families lived happily. The houses were neat and the streets were clean. What made this neighborhood special was a small creek that ran behind many of the homes. The creek was not very big, but it was very beautiful. The water was clear and fresh, and it flowed gently over rocks and plants. Birds came to drink from the creek. Sometimes, little fish could be seen swimming. The creek made the neighborhood feel close to nature, and many people enjoyed the calm sound of the water. Mr. James had lived in his house for many years. Every morning he would step out into his backyard and look at the creek. He liked to watch the sunlight shine on the water and listen to the birds singing in the trees. The creek was his favorite part of living there. It made him feel peaceful and happy. Sometimes he would sit on a small bench near the water and think quietly. He often invited his friends and family to visit and enjoy the calm place with him. Children in the neighborhood also loved the creek, would play near it in the summer. They made small boats from leaves and sticks and floated them on the water. They caught tadpoles and looked at frogs. The parents watched carefully, but were glad their kids could play safely in nature. The creek was not just a small waterway. It was a place for joy and learning. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, or HOA for short. The HOA was a group of people who helped take care of the neighborhood. They made rules to keep the area clean and safe. Most people liked the HOA because it helped keep the neighborhood nice. The HOA also made sure the gardens looked good and that everyone followed the rules about keeping their yards tidy. For many years, the creek remained untouched and natural. The HOA and the residents agreed that it was important to keep it safe. No one wanted to harm the animals or plants that lived there. They even had small cleanup days where families came together to pick up trash near the creek. Mr. James often helped on those days. He wanted to protect the creek for his children and the future. But not everyone in the neighborhood was happy about the creek. Over time, some residents started to complain. They said the creek sometimes caused problems, and noticed that during heavy rains, the creek would sometimes overflow and water would get into their yards. They also said the creek attracted bugs, like mosquitoes, which made it uncomfortable to be outside. Some people thought the creek was messy and wanted it cleaned up or fixed. The complaints grew louder. At HOA meetings, some residents asked if there was a way to stop the creek from causing trouble. They wanted the water to be controlled better so it would not flood their homes or yards. Some suggested putting walls or pipes around the creek. Others thought it would be best to fill the creek with concrete, so the water would flow in a straight path without flooding. Mr. James listened to these complaints with concern. He understood that flooding could be a problem, but he also worried about what would happen if the creek was changed too much. He loved the creek for its natural beauty and the animals it supported. He knew that filling a creek with concrete could harm the environment. So he decided to speak up. At the next HOA meeting, Mr. James stood up and explained his feelings. He told the group that the creek was more than just water flowing in the neighborhood. It was home to many living things, and it helped keep the area healthy. He said that nature was important and that they should look for ways to protect the creek while solving the flooding problems. He suggested that they ask experts to study the creek and find a natural solution. Some people in the meeting agreed with Mr. James. They said it was important to be careful and to think about the environment. But many others thought that the creek was just a problem that needed fixing quickly. They wanted the HOA to act fast and stop the flooding, despite Mr. James's words. The HOA decided to move forward with the plan to fill parts of the creek with concrete. They said this would make the water flow more controlled and reduce flooding. They promised to keep the neighborhood safe and clean. Mr. James felt sad, but hoped that the HOA would at least do the work carefully and not harm the creek too much. Construction work started quietly. Large machines came into the neighborhood. Workers poured concrete along the creek bed, covering parts of the natural waterway. The clear water was soon replaced by hard gray concrete. Some animals left, and the plants near the creek began to die. The neighborhood looked different. The peaceful, natural creek was turning into a strange, artificial water channel. Many residents did not know about all the changes because the HOA had not told everyone. Some only found out when the machine started working. Mr. James tried to talk to his neighbors and explain what was happening. Some listened and felt worried. Others said that the HOA was just doing what was best for the neighborhood. Despite the changes, life went on. The children still played outside, but the creek was no longer a fun place for them. The birds stopped coming as often. Mr. James missed the natural sound of the water and the sight of fish swimming. He wished the creek could be saved. As weeks passed, the weather grew colder, and the neighborhood prepared for winter. Mr. James hoped that in the spring things might get better. But deep inside, he worried about the future of the creek and the neighborhood he loved so much. After the concrete work on the creek was finished, many residents thought the problem would be solved. The Homeowners Association (HOA) said the water would flow better and flooding would stop. But soon, Mr. James and many others started to notice something was wrong. One day, after heavy rain, Mr. James looked outside and saw water standing in many places it never had before. His own backyard had puddles that would not go away for days. The grass was soggy, and the soil was soft and muddy. He walked to the creek area, but it was no longer a clear flowing waterway. Instead, it looked like a shallow swamp. The concrete had blocked the natural flow of water. Now water was getting stuck in low places. Other neighbors had the same problem. Some had water flooding their gardens, and others had muddy patches near their homes. The smell of wet earth mixed with old water filled the air. Mosquitoes began to appear in larger numbers. People started to complain again, but this time the problems were bigger. Mr. James felt very worried. He knew that a natural creek helps water flow smoothly during rains by allowing it to spread out and soak into the ground. But with the creek covered in concrete, the water could not move the same way. The concrete made the water flow faster in some parts, but it also stopped the ground from absorbing water naturally. This caused water to stay longer on the surface and flood yards and streets. One morning, Mr. James visited his friend Mrs. Lee, who lived a few houses down the creek. Mrs. Lee told him about the damage to her home. "Water got into my basement last night," she said sadly. "It has never happened before. The floor is wet, and I had to move some things away from the walls." Mr. James nodded. "I saw the same in my yard. The creek was like a swamp. I think the concrete work changed everything." They decided to talk to other neighbors. Soon, many residents gathered to share their stories about flooding and water damage. They all felt the same worry. The neighborhood was not safe from water problems anymore. The natural beauty of the creek was lost, and the new concrete waterway was causing trouble. Some residents were angry with the HOA. They felt the HOA did not listen to their concerns before filling the creek. Others felt that the HOA only wanted to save money on maintenance and did not care about nature or the people. Mr. James tried to calm his neighbors, saying, "We need to work together. Let's find a way to fix this." The residents decided to ask for help. They contacted the city government and local environmental groups. They wanted experts to come and study the creek and the flooding problems. Mr. James and Mrs. Lee attended meetings with these groups. The experts explained that natural creeks have soft beds and plants that help absorb water and slow it down. Concrete, however, does the opposite. It makes water flow fast but stops it from soaking into the ground. The experts also said that when water pools in one place for a long time, it creates swampy areas. These areas are perfect for mosquitoes and other insects. This can cause health problems and make life uncomfortable for residents. They recommended restoring the creek back to its natural state to help the water flow better and support plants and animals. But not everyone agreed with the experts. Some neighbors still believed the concrete creek was better because it looked cleaner and easier to maintain. They said the natural creek was messy and attracted bugs. These neighbors did not want to spend money or wait for long restoration projects. They wanted quick solutions. The HOA was in a difficult position. It spent money on the concrete project and wanted to avoid more costs. The HOA board members argued about what to do next. Some wanted to fix the problems by adding drainage pipes or pumps. Others wanted to listen to the experts and restore the creek. Mr. James continued to speak out at meetings, sharing his concerns and those of many neighbors. In one important meeting, Stode stood up and said, "We trusted the HOA to protect our neighborhood. But this concrete work hurt our homes and our environment. We must fix this now. We need to restore the creek to its natural state so water can flow safely and the neighborhood can be healthy again. His words made many people think. Some neighbors clapped, while others stayed quiet. The meeting ended with a promise to study the problem more and find a better solution. Mr. James felt hopeful, but knew it would take time. Meanwhile, the water problems continued. After more rains, the swampy areas grew bigger. Mosquitoes were everywhere, and some families started using mosquito nets and sprays to protect themselves. The smell of wet, stagnant water made it hard to enjoy the outdoors. Children stopped playing near the creek, and the neighborhood lost some of its joy. Mr. James spent time reading about creeks and water flow. He learned that healthy creeks help keep neighborhoods safe from floods and provide homes for animals and plants. He believed that if the creek was restored, the water would flow naturally, and the flooding and swamp problems would disappear. He wanted to share this knowledge with his neighbors. One weekend, Mr. James organized a small gathering in his backyard. He invited neighbors to talk about the creek and the problems. He showed pictures of natural creeks and explained how they work. Many people listened carefully and asked questions. Some said they wished they knew more before the concrete work started. The gathering helped neighbors understand the problem better. They agreed that protecting the creek was important, not just for their homes, but for the whole neighborhood. They decided to work together to ask the HOA and city officials to restore the creek. Mr. James and a group of neighbors wrote letters to the HOA in the city. They asked for a plan to remove the concrete and bring back the natural creek. They also asked for support from environmental groups and experts to help with the project. The HOA was slow to respond at first. They said they needed to study the issue more and think about costs. Some HOA members still believed the concrete was the right choice. With growing pressure from residents and city officials, the HOA agreed to meet again and discuss restoration plans. During this time, Mr. James felt both frustrated and determined. He understood that fixing the damage would not be easy. It would take time, money, and effort from many people. But he believed it was the right thing to do. One day, Mr. James walked along the creek again. The concrete was still there, but the water was slow and muddy. He saw fewer birds and animals than before. The neighborhood felt different, less alive and less happy. He made a promise to himself and his neighbors. He would not stop until the creek was safe and natural again. The neighborhood deserved a clean, healthy place where families could enjoy nature and homes could be safe from flooding. Mr. James knew the road ahead would be long, but with hope, hard work, and community support, he believed the creek could be restored, and with it, the neighborhood's peace and happiness. As time passed, the situation in the neighborhood became more difficult. The creek, which had once been a peaceful place full of life, was now a muddy, swampy area. The water stood still in many places because the concrete had blocked its natural path. This caused many problems that affected the daily life of the people who lived there. The flooding got worse during heavy rains. Water collected in low parts of the neighborhood and stayed there for days. Streets became slippery and hard to walk on. Some people had trouble getting to their cars or leaving their homes because their driveways were covered in water. The lawns were soggy and muddy. Grass began to die in many yards. Mr. James often walked around the neighborhood to see how others were doing. He met many families who shared their worries. Mrs. Lee told him her basement was still wet even after many days without rain. Mr. Sanchez said his garden was flooded, and he had lost many plants. Children could no longer play safely near the creek because of the mud and mosquitoes. The swampy water also brought many mosquitoes, which made life uncomfortable. Mosquito bites caused itchy red spots, especially on children and older people. Some families bought special nets and sprays to protect themselves. Schools in the area reminded parents to watch their children carefully to avoid mosquito bites. The neighborhood, once full of joy and outdoor activities, was now a place many wanted to avoid. Mr. James felt very sad to see the changes. He remembered how happy the neighborhood had been when the creek was clean and natural. He knew the concrete work had caused the water problems, but he also knew it was not too late to fix things. The residents organized more meetings to talk about what they could do. They invited experts who understood water and the environment. The experts explained clearly how the concrete blocked the creek's natural flow and caused the flooding. They showed pictures of healthy creeks that helped water soak into the ground and prevent floods. One expert said natural creeks act like sponges. They slow down water and help it spread evenly. Plants and soil soak up water and keep it clean. Concrete blocks all this, makes water move faster but does not let it sink into the ground. That's why flooding happens. The expert suggested that the concrete should be removed carefully. He said the creek needed to be restored too. Its natural shape with soil, rocks, and plants. This would help water flow safely and support wildlife. The restoration would take time and money, but it was the best way to protect the neighborhood. The residents listened and agreed. They wanted to save their homes and bring back the creek. But the HOA was still hesitant. They worried about the cost and the time needed for such a big project. Some HOA members said, "We fixed the creek to save money on maintenance." Now, this restoration might be very expensive. Mr. James and other neighbors did not give up. They wrote letters to the city council and environmental groups. They explained the problems caused by the concrete creek and asked for help. Many neighbors signed the letters to show that the community cared. The city government took notice. Officials came to visit the neighborhood and see the problems themselves. They spoke with residents, HOA members, and experts. The officials understood that the concrete creek was causing damage and agreed that restoration was important. After several meetings and talks, the city decided to support the restoration project. They offered to help with some funds and technical advice. The HOA board finally agreed to start planning the work to remove the concrete and restore the creek. Mr. James was happy to hear this news. He knew the restoration would not be easy, but it was a big step forward. He and other residents formed a small group to help with the project. They wanted to make sure the work was done carefully and with respect for nature. Before starting the restoration, experts studied the area. They measured the land and tested the soil and water. They made plans to bring back the creek's natural curves and flow. The plans included planting native plants and trees along the creek to help the soil stay healthy and the water stay clean. The restoration work began slowly. Workers removed the concrete carefully, trying not to harm the nearby homes. Heavy machines broke the concrete into pieces and took it away. The creek bed was reshaped with soil and rocks. New plants were planted along the banks to hold the soil and provide homes for animals. During the work, some neighbors watched closely. They asked questions and gave ideas. Mr. James helped explain why each step was important. He told people that the new plants would help keep the water clean and slow it down during rains. He said the creek would look different at first, but over time, it would become beautiful again. The restoration work took several months. During this time, the neighborhood faced some challenges. Sometimes there was more mud and water around the creek as the new soil settled. Some residents felt uncomfortable with the changes, but Mr. James reminded them to be patient. One morning, after a heavy rain, Mr. James walked to the creek. He was surprised to see the water flowing gently along the new creek bed. The plants were growing strong, and birds had started to visit again. The water looked clear and fresh. The creek was alive once more. Many neighbors came out to see the changes. They smiled and felt hopeful. Children began playing near the creek again, but this time carefully and safely. The mosquitoes were fewer because the water was moving and clean. The neighborhood felt peaceful and happy like before. Mr. James felt proud of what the community had done. He knew they had saved their neighborhood by working together. The restored creek was a sign of hope and respect for nature. The HOA learned a valuable lesson too. They promised to listen more to the residents and experts before making decisions. They also agreed to protect the creek and keep the neighborhood safe from flooding in the future. Mr. James's story shows how people can make a difference when they care for their homes and environment. It teaches us that nature is important and must be protected. It reminds us that working together can solve big problems. The creek, once filled with concrete, was now a living, flowing part of the neighborhood again. It gave peace to the people and homes that needed it most. And Mr. James knew the creek would stay safe for many years to come. After the flooding and swamp problems became clear, Many residents in the neighborhood grew upset with the Homeowners Association HOA. They felt the HOA had not listened to their concerns before making the decision to fill the creek with concrete. Now, the consequences were serious. Homes were damaged. Yards were flooded, and the neighborhood had lost much of its natural beauty. Mr. James, who had been a strong voice for protecting the creek, decided it was time to take action with other concerned neighbors. They knew that talking alone was not enough. They needed to work together to show the HOA and local authorities that they wanted change and restoration. The neighbors organized themselves into a group called Friends of the Creek. This group was made up of people who cared about the environment and wanted to fix the problems caused by the concrete. They met regularly to plan their next steps, talked about how to raise awareness, how to gather support from more residents, and how to reach out to experts who could help them. One important idea was to collect signatures from residents who supported restoring the creek. Mr. James and other volunteers went door to door, explaining the problems and asking neighbors to sign a petition. Many people were happy to help. Even some neighbors who had not been involved before joined the cause after learning it's more about the damage to the creek and the flooding. The petition was taken to the HOA board at a special meeting. Mr. James spoke clearly and calmly. "We are not against the HOA," he said. "Just want the best for our neighborhood. Concrete in the creek has caused flooding and hurt our environment. We ask the HOA to work with us to restore the creek and fix the damage." Some HOA board members listened carefully. Others were defensive. They said the concrete was meant to protect the neighborhood and save money, but the evidence from residents and experts was strong. The HOA board realized they could not ignore the community's concerns. At the same time, the Friends of the Creek group reached out to local environmental organizations. They wanted experts who could study the creek and recommend the best ways to restore it. The experts came to visit the neighborhood and examined the creek and the concrete work. After their study, the experts presented a report. They explained clearly that the concrete had changed the creek's natural flow, causing water to pool and flood. They said the best solution was to remove the concrete and restore the creek's natural bed with soil, plants, and rocks. The experts also spoke about the benefits of a healthy creek. It helps filter water, supports animals and plants, and prevents flooding by allowing water to soak into the ground. They said restoring the creek would also make the neighborhood more beautiful and pleasant. The report was shared with the HOA, city officials, and the residents. This gave the Friends of the Creek group strong support for their cause. They used the report to ask the HOA to approve a restoration project. The HOA board held another meeting to discuss the restoration plan. Some members were worried about the costs and the time needed, but after listening to the experts in the community, they agreed to start the project. The HOA also promised to work closely with residents and experts to make sure the restoration was done well. With the HOA's agreement, the Friends of the Creek group helped plan the restoration. They worked with experts to decide which plants to use and how to shape the creek bed. They made sure native plants that would grow well in the area were included. These plants would hold the soil, clean the water, and provide homes for animals. The residents were invited to volunteer for the project. Many families, including Mr. James's, joined planting days where they helped put new plants along the creek. Children learned about nature and how to care for their environment. It became a community effort that brought neighbors together. The restoration work, the neighborhood faced some challenges. The removal of concrete created mud and dust. Some people were worried about noise and the changes in the landscape, but the project leaders kept the community informed and involved, which helped ease concerns. Slowly, the creek began to take shape. The water flowed more freely again. The plants grew green and tall. Birds and insects returned. The neighborhood started to feel alive once more. Children played safely near the creek, and families enjoyed walking along the natural path. The restoration also helped solve the flooding problems. Water was able to soak into the ground instead of standing on the surface. During rains, the creek carried water smoothly without overflowing. The swampy areas disappeared, and mosquitoes became fewer. The neighborhood learned many lessons from this experience. They realized how important it is to protect natural areas like creeks. They also understood the value of working together and listening to each other's voices. Mr. James felt proud of what the community had accomplished. He knew that saving the creek was not just about the water. It was about protecting a home for nature and a place for people to enjoy life. The restored creek was a symbol of hope and care. The HOA promised to be more open and to involve residents in future decisions. They agreed to regularly maintain the creek in a natural way, respecting the environment and the needs of the community. As the years passed, the creek remained healthy and beautiful. Neighborhood thrived and people felt closer to nature and to each other. Mr. James often sat by the creek listening to the flowing water and watching the wildlife. He smiled, knowing that the neighborhood had come through a hard time and had grown stronger. The story of the creek became a lesson for other neighborhoods too. It showed how important it is to protect nature, to listen to community concerns, and to work together to solve problems. It reminded everyone that nature and people need to live in harmony. Mr. James's neighborhood was once again a peaceful and happy place, all because a group of caring people refused to give up. They believed in their home, in their future, and they made a difference for themselves and generations to come. After the creek was restored, life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The water flowed freely again, clean and clear. Birds and small animals came back to the area. Children played near the creek without fear of mud or mosquitoes. Families walked along the paths and enjoyed the peaceful sounds of nature. The neighborhood felt alive and happy once more. Mr. James often sat by the creek. Watching the water move gently over the rocks and plants, he felt a deep sense of peace and pride. He remembered the hard times when the creek was filled with concrete and the floods ruined many yards and homes. But now he saw how the community had worked together and made a positive change. The restoration brought more than just beauty to the neighborhood. It taught the residents important lessons about nature and community. People learned how important it is to protect natural places like creeks, rivers, and trees. They understood that nature helps keep homes safe by managing water and providing clean air. The neighborhood's Homeowners Association (HOA) also changed. They realized that making decisions without listening to all residents and experts could lead to problems. Now the HOA promised to communicate better with the community. They included environmental experts when planning projects and asked for residents' opinions before making big changes. Many residents, including Mr. James, joined a new committee to protect the creek and the environment. They organized cleanup days, planted trees, and watched over the creek to keep it healthy. The community became stronger because people cared for each other in their shared home schools. Nearby used the restored creek as a place to teach children about nature and the environment. Teachers brought students to the creek to learn about plants, animals, and how water flows. The creek became a living classroom where children could see and touch the natural world to help them grow respect and love for the environment. Some neighbors who had once supported filling the creek with concrete changed their minds. After seeing the damage it caused and the benefits of restoration, they joined the efforts to protect the creek. The experience helped everyone understand that protecting nature is important for all. Mr. James's family also felt the positive change. His children grew up with the creek as a special place to play and learn. They helped plant flowers and watched frogs and birds return. The creek gave them a connection to the world outside their homes and taught them to care for nature. The neighborhood story spread to other communities. People heard about how a small creek, once damaged by concrete, was brought back to life by a group of caring neighbors. Some neighborhoods invited Mr. James and others to share their experience. They wanted to learn how to protect their own creeks in natural areas. The story of the creek showed that nature and people must work together. It reminded everyone that small actions like planting a tree or protecting water can make a big difference. It also showed that communities are stronger when people listen, work together, and care for their homes. Mr. James often thought about the future. He hoped that the creek would stay healthy for many years and that the neighborhood would continue to protect it. He believed that by teaching children and working together, they could keep the creek and the environment safe for generations to come. Sometimes, Mr. James would invite neighbors to sit by the creek with him. They would talk about the past, the hard lessons learned, and the hope for a better future. The creek, once filled with concrete and silence, was now a place of life, learning, and community. In the end, the creek was more than water flowing through the neighborhood. It was a symbol of care, hope, and the power of people coming together. It reminded everyone that protecting nature is protecting ourselves. The neighborhood had faced a big challenge, but through patience, knowledge, and unity, it had overcome. Mr. James smiled as he watched the sunlight dance on the water. He knew the story of the creek was far from over, but now it was a story of strength and new beginnings.